Have you ever imagined a day when you're thrust into a whirlwind of deceit, accused of a crime you didn't commit? That's what happened to Olivia Williams, a brave, resilient woman, yet trapped by the very system she trusted. What would happen if you were the only one who knew you were innocent, but all the evidence pointed to you as the criminal? The feeling of despair when surrounded by walls closing in, as the truth is gradually obscured. Would you have the strength to fight? Imagine yourself as Olivia Williams. What would you do? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the unexpected twists in her journey to find justice. Olivia Williams, a young woman with eyes full of dreams and hope, never imagined she would become the target of a ruthless conspiracy. She had spent her life fighting for justice, believing in a system that would protect the innocent, but now that very system had turned against her. Just because of her skin color, just because of her courage to stand up against racism, Olivia was framed in a drug trafficking scheme she knew nothing about. Corrupt police officers and powerful judges, who were supposed to uphold justice, had turned into monsters, manipulating the system to protect their own interests. They pushed Olivia into a battle not just with outside enemies, but with her very belief in justice. With every step she took, every struggle to prove her innocence, it felt as if she was being cornered more than ever. But deep down, in the depths of her heart, hope still burned. She couldn't lose. She couldn't let the truth be buried forever. Olivia still believed that, despite being pushed to the darkest corners of life, justice would eventually prevail. Could she find the strength to fight against the corrupt empire that had taken over this city? Could she find a way out, uncover the truth, and expose the lies of those behind this plot? These questions haunted her every second, every minute, and the tension was about to explode, pushing her into an unpredictable journey. In that moment, Olivia wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for all those who had been forgotten in the shadows of corruption and prejudice. Under the dim lights of Tanner's bar, a dark conspiracy was being woven. Nicholas Hill, a detective from the Redwood Heights Police Department, and Sergeant Samuel Adams sat across from each other, their eyes filled with sternness and ambition. Every word they spoke was shrouded in calculation. They knew that if they didn't act quickly, their careers would be threatened. And Sophia Wilson, the woman they had targeted, would be the biggest threat to the corrupt empire they had built. Judge Porter, now manipulated by greed and debt, had become a puppet in their hands. They offered him an irresistible bribe: help them eliminate Sophia, a woman who had tirelessly fought for justice, and all their crimes would be buried in darkness. The price of complicity wasn't just a large sum of money, it was protection for their dark secrets. And so, the plan began to take shape. The unexpected twist came from Sophia's own innocence and resilience. She had no idea that those she once trusted were silently crafting a web of lies to trap her. They planted fake evidence in her house, pushing her into a life-or-death struggle with no escape. But could Sophia recognize the conspiracy before it was too late? The tension wasn't just about the deception, it was about Sophia's heart, where hope still burned. She couldn't let these corrupt people win. Could Sophia break their plan and uncover the truth? These questions circled in her mind as she entered a battle not just for herself, but for everything justice represented. Sophia Wilson, the woman known for her resilience and sharp intellect, has never accepted injustice. Born into a society filled with racism and corruption, she quickly learned how to face challenges, not by giving up, but by standing strong and fighting. She believed that only justice could change the world, and that passion led her to law, where she was determined to dismantle every injustice she had witnessed. But life has never been easy for Sophia. Despite possessing unmatched intelligence and unwavering determination, the cost of fighting against an unjust system was greater than she had ever imagined. Though she had a promising career and loyal friends by her side, every step she took was met with obstacles, from threats by corrupt police officers to attacks by those lurking in the shadows. And in those moments, loneliness and regret filled her heart. But Sophia never gave up. She had an unwavering hope that if she persisted long enough, the truth would eventually come to light. As the vile conspiracy against her began to unfold, an unexpected twist occurred. Sophia, despite being beaten down, found within herself the strength to rise, turning her pain into the motivation to fight even harder. Would she be able to turn the tide, uncover the truth, and protect justice when faced with powerful, dangerous enemies? That question echoed constantly in her mind, a reminder that sometimes only love for the truth can push back the darkness. Sophia Wilson had always been passionate about justice, ready to face any challenge to protect what is right. But her resilience, her relentless fight for change, became the greatest threat to the corrupt power structure of the Redwood Heights Police. Nicholas Hill and Samuel Adams, who had manipulated the law for years, now realized that Sophia was the only one who could bring down their filthy empire. And so, a dark conspiracy began to form. With cold calculation, Hill and Adams devised a perfect plan to frame Sophia for a drug trafficking scheme she had no involvement in. They created a fake dossier, planted evidence in her home, and staged the perfect setup. Everything moved quickly and secretly, but somewhere in the darkness, a glimmer of hope sparked within Sophia. Could she uncover the plot before it was too late? The tension escalates as Sophia learns that her life is being driven toward destruction. She must not only fight against the corrupt, but also face those she once trusted. Regret rises as she realizes that the system she had always believed in is treating her like an enemy. But at that moment, an unexpected twist occurs, and Sophia finds small signs that someone is helping her. So, who will stand by Sophia in this fight? Can she break the conspiracy and expose the truth? These questions swirl in her mind as she steps into a life or death battle, not only for herself, but for all the innocent people crushed under the darkness of corruption. Nicholas Hill and Samuel Adams, with their devious schemes, had prepared the perfect setup. In the darkness of the late night, they secretly broke into Sophia's apartment, carefully placing fake drug packets in hidden corners, fictional evidence they hoped would make her guilty. Every step they took was meticulously calculated, leaving no trace behind. But what no one knew was that, while these corrupt individuals carried out their plan, Sophia was still struggling with contradictions in her own life. She had no idea that her belief in justice was leading her right into a deadly trap. The entire city of Redwood Heights was drowning in silence, filled with conspiracies, and Sophia was now the next victim in this power game. One morning, as she prepared for another ordinary day at work, the police raided her home, handcuffing her in front of her neighbors and colleagues. Everyone around her stood in shock, unable to believe their eyes. Sophia was arrested for drug trafficking, a crime she had never committed. But the truth was hidden behind their clever deceptions. Sophia had no chance to meet her family or friends, locked away in a small room between four cold walls. A wave of regret and helplessness flooded her heart. All she had fought for, all the dreams she once had, now seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. In those hours, hope began to fade. But could Sophia find a way out of this trap? Did she have enough strength to break the conspiracy that aimed to destroy her life? These unanswered questions haunted her mind as she sat there, in solitude and pain, waiting for a miracle. The suffocating and dimly lit cell where Sophia Wilson was held seemed to swallow all her hope. Every sound from outside the door was a reminder that she was trapped in an unfair world. The feeling of betrayal, being abandoned by the very system she had once wholeheartedly trusted, weighed heavily on her heart. But in that loneliness, Sophia never allowed herself to be defeated. Even in her most desperate moments, her belief in justice still burned brightly within her. She sat upright on the cold metal bed, her hands relaxed, but in her mind, the laws she had studied for years kept turning. Her knowledge of criminal law, the sharpest weapon she had, was now the only thing that could help her fight. Every day she recorded every anomaly in her case, every hole in the story that the police and the judge had crafted. These were the first steps, small but resolute, to break the conspiracy that sought to destroy her life. The suspense and tension grew as Sophia realized that every clue, every detail, was a key to unlocking the truth. She knew that to win, she couldn't rely on anyone but herself. Could she find the truth and prove her innocence before it was too late? This question repeated in her mind like an impossible challenge she couldn't abandon. Hope never truly fades, and from within that darkness, Sophia found the strength to keep fighting. She would not allow herself to become a victim of injustice. No matter how hard it got, she would use everything she had to uncover the truth. During the long days of captivity, Sophia Wilson began to feel the darkness closing in, but an unexpected light appeared from an unlikely source. Abby Hernandez, a new police officer who had never met Sophia, had been quietly following the case from behind closed doors. Abby had witnessed the injustice Sophia was enduring, and her heart could not remain silent in the face of the clear mistakes in the police's statements. She couldn't just stand by and do nothing. With courage and a belief in justice, Abby decided to provide secret documents, priceless evidence that could expose the wrongdoings of Nicholas Hill and Samuel Adams. These documents weren't just a lifeline for Sophia. They were a devastating blow to the corrupt system that had dominated for so many years. The thrill of receiving these documents was indescribable for Sophia. They were the key to unlocking the door to the truth. But would this breakthrough be strong enough to bring down a corrupt empire? These questions swirled around her like a storm. But it wasn't just Abby who stood by Sophia. The community, the neighbors, the friends who had witnessed her dedication and integrity now stood up, no longer silent. They organized protests, sent letters of complaint, and continued to fight for justice. Hope surged within Sophia. She was no longer alone. The love and connection between her and the community burned like a blazing fire, lighting the way forward. Would this unity be powerful enough to defeat those who manipulated power? The answer was still unclear, but one thing was certain. Sophia was no longer fighting alone. The trial began with intense tension. The courtroom was deathly silent, only the sound of the judge's gavel breaking the stillness. Sophia sat upright, every movement deliberate, but in her eyes a glimmer of hope shone. She knew this was the defining moment and the only chance to break the false accusations. But would her defense team, led by Elaine Patterson, be able to turn the tide against the fabricated evidence the police had planted? The prosecution's arguments seemed convincing, but Elaine Patterson, with her sharpness and precision in every word, delivered a stunning breakthrough. She not only pointed out the inconsistencies in the timestamps, but she also exposed the forged documents the police had created. The evidence that seemed irrefutable was now laid bare, with clear errors revealed under the light of justice. Every detail Elaine presented was a sharp blow to the lies, eroding the false narrative the police had built. The atmosphere in the courtroom became electrifying. Would the judge and jury recognize the truth? Would these unexpected twists be enough to reverse the outcome? Everyone in the room was silent, afraid to even breathe. The feeling of regret surged within Sophia as she recalled her days of confinement, but now she felt a flicker of hope ignite. Faced with the truth, the police witnesses began to falter, and the pieces of the case began to crumble. Sophia was no longer the defendant. She was the victor in this battle. Judge Porter sat in his dimly lit office, holding a glass of bourbon but unable to drink. The soft light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the deep lines of worry growing more apparent with every passing moment. Each time he looked at the file, a wave of unease swept through his mind. The evidence against him, the documents he had conspired to cover up, were now spiraling out of his control. Everything he had built over his career felt like a crumbling mountain on the verge of collapse. Anxiety and regret surged within Porter. He had once been a respected man, a judge admired for his integrity, but now his wrongful decisions were leading to an ending he could never reverse. With every passing minute, he felt as if he were standing on the edge of a precipice. His career could end because of a single wrong choice. Everything he had done would be reduced to fragments once the truth was revealed. But there was something different, an unexpected twist. Could he truly avoid the consequences of his mistakes? Would Sophia, the woman he had left to the mercy of dark schemes, find the strength to expose him to the world? The anxiety quickened his heartbeat. Each question gnawed at his mind, creating a vortex with no escape. But then he looked at the picture of his family on the desk, his loved ones, and his greed could not hide the overwhelming regret. In that moment, Judge Porter understood that the truth could not be buried forever. The courtroom held its breath as Judge Porter delivered the final verdict. Hope, which had seemed to fade in Sophia's heart after so many days of fighting, now surged within her. She felt every drop of sweat on her brow, every beat of her heart racing. She had fought not only for herself, but for all the innocent people whose lives had been destroyed by corruption. Every moment in the courtroom had been a life-or-death battle, but now in front of her, the light was beginning to shine. Not guilty. The judge's declaration struck like lightning, shattering the tense atmosphere and dissolving all doubt. The courtroom erupted in excitement and disbelief. Sophia, who had been pushed to the brink of despair, now stood firm like a warrior, her eyes filled with faith and love for justice. The feeling of victory washed over her. But it wasn't just a personal victory. It was the victory of justice, of the people who had always stood by her, never leaving her side. But the unexpected twist didn't stop there. When Sophia heard the news of the arrest of the corrupt officers and Judge Porter, a wave of surprise surged through her. She hadn't just won the case, she had also helped expose the true faces of the powerful individuals who had caused her and the community so much pain. Would this be the end? Or was this just the beginning of a larger battle? In this moment, Sophia was no longer alone. The community stood by her, and now she had become a symbol of hope and unity. As Sophia walked into her new office at the Redwood Heights Police Department, the feeling was both unfamiliar and familiar. This place, once home to dark conspiracies and corruption, had now become the battleground where she would fight to rebuild justice. After everything she had endured, from the desperate hours in her cell to the ultimate victory in court, Sophia could feel the power of hope and her burning love for justice deep in her heart. This moment was not just a personal victory, it was a victory for everyone who had stood by her. Looking at the reflections in the windows of her new office, Sophia felt the immense responsibility resting on her shoulders. Could she find the strength to confront the corrupt individuals still hiding in the shadows of the legal system? Could she stand strong when facing those who had once manipulated everything? But Sophia was not just an overseer. She was the leader in the fight against corruption, a warrior not only defending justice, but also bringing hope to the entire community. Every decision she made would not only affect herself, but also thousands of others. The initial tension gradually turned into confidence. Every time she looked at the documents, the case files, she knew that things would not be easy, but she would never stop. The biggest question now was, could Sophia fight and rebuild the system from the rubble left by the corrupt individuals? Or would those shadows continue to persist? The answer could only be written through her actions. Redwood Heights was no longer the same. No longer were there the weary sighs of people oppressed by corrupt police officers. No longer were there hopeless eyes when justice was twisted by those in power. The city had changed, and Sophia Wilson was the flame leading the way. After being exonerated, she did not choose the easy path of leaving this place for a more peaceful life. Instead, she returned to the very battleground that almost destroyed her. But this time, she came back with the strength of a leader, a symbol of resilience. As a special investigator, she now oversaw every move at the Redwood Heights Police Department, rooting out the remaining corrupt officers and ensuring no one else would endure the injustice she had suffered. But the fight was never easy. There were still those who resisted in the shadows, officers willing to do anything to protect the old system. Threats began to surface, anonymous letters, warning calls telling her to step back. But Sophia was not the type to back down. She knew she had survived the worst, and she wouldn't stop while justice was still under threat. The community of Redwood Heights stood by her. Those who had once been afraid now found the courage to speak out. Activists, lawyers, journalists, all joined together. Each day, Sophia witnessed the change, from a city rotting with corruption to one where trust in justice was slowly being revived. But the question remained, could Sophia completely change Redwood Heights? Could justice truly win, or would the darkness find a way to return? She knew this journey was not over. It had only just begun. When the courtroom door closed, Sophia Wilson was no longer the woman who had been trapped, knocked down by a corrupt system. She had won, but her victory wasn't just a verdict declaring her not guilty. It was the transformation of a system that had rotted from within. Redwood Heights had once been a city dominated by power and manipulation. Corrupt police officers, bribed judges, and irresponsible leaders, all of them had believed they were untouchable. But Sophia proved them wrong. Not only were Nicholas Hill and Samuel Adams brought to light, but those who had supported them couldn't escape either. The system they built had crumbled right before their eyes. But she didn't stop there. As a special investigator, Sophia oversaw every policy, every investigation, every ruling. The honest officers finally had a voice, and for the first time in years, the people of Redwood Heights began to believe that justice truly existed. But the enemy didn't disappear easily. Sophia knew that a victory in the courtroom didn't mean the battle was over. There were still those lurking in the shadows, the venomous snakes yet to be exposed. One late night, as she was leaving the office, an anonymous letter was slipped under the crack of her car door. "Do you think you've won? The game has just begun." Her heart clenched, but not from fear. She was no longer a victim. She was the one who would hunt down those behind the darkness. But Sophia was no longer alone. The community stood by her. Those who had once been silent now found their voices. The victims who had been oppressed by the system now found the courage to demand justice. Human rights organizations, independent journalists, and honest lawyers all stood by her in this fight. At a public ceremony announcing judicial reform, Sophia stepped up to the podium before hundreds of Redwood Heights residents. She looked out at the crowd, people who had once been afraid, once oppressed, now filled with hope. She took a deep breath, and with a steady voice, she declared, "They tried to bury us in the dark, but they didn't know that we are seeds, and now we are rising stronger than ever." The crowd erupted. The applause echoed down the streets. It wasn't just a speech, it was an oath, a commitment that Sophia Wilson would never let justice be trampled again. Sophia Wilson's story is not just the journey of an individual reclaiming justice. It is a powerful reminder of the strength of perseverance, courage, and faith in the truth. In a world where corruption can seep into every corner, where the guilty can manipulate justice for their own gain, standing up against injustice is never easy. But if one person dares to face the darkness, she can light the way for thousands of others. Sophia taught us that justice doesn't always prevail immediately, but if we keep fighting, the truth will always find a way to surface. Confronted with betrayal, manipulation, and even despair, she never gave up. She used her intellect, courage, and determination to topple a decaying system, proving that those in power cannot forever trample on the vulnerable. The greatest lesson we can learn from Sophia is, no one can fight alone, but with enough trust and unity, we can change an entire system. The community stood with her, and thanks to the strength of connection, Redwood Heights was no longer a city engulfed in darkness. This shows that, in any society, when people realize their voices have power, they can force those in power to be held accountable. And finally, Sophia's story reminds us that justice is not just an idea, it is the responsibility of us all. If someone is treated unfairly, if a system is manipulated by the corrupt, then speaking out and fighting for it is not just a right, but an obligation.